Hello, my name is Teresa Ojinma, and I'm the owner of Home Fitness Plus. And one of the most common questions I get is, what is restorative movement? So I'm going to share a little bit of information on what restorative movement is based on my education in somatic movement. So a little bit of who I am and a little bit of my background. I have a master's degree in international healthcare management, economics, and policy, a bachelor's in kinesiology, and a certificate in clinical exercise physiology, as well as a certificate in essential somatics, movement teacher. And let's begin with one of the quotes that I like from the founder of clinical somatics, which is, "The turning of one's attention inward is a powerful agent for change." So when we take time to focus on our internal sensations and things that are happening in our body or even in our lives, when we self-reflection is very powerful. And that's what this practice is based on. What I'm going to teach in this session is the history, which is some of the somatic pioneers. We'll talk about where it began and who's involved in the history of it, what somatic education is, a little bit of the myth of aging, the cause of most chronic muscle pain, which is what Thomas Hanna called sensory motor amnesia, how all humans respond reflexively to stress within 3 full body reflexive patterns, and how trauma, daily movement habits, and reflexive responses to stress disconnect us from the body, how to lengthen these muscles and reset muscle function without stretching. So I'm going to also briefly compare static stretching and the movement technique used in somatic movement, and the benefits and why restorative movement education is so important. So first, we'll start with the history. So it was born from these pioneers. The first one is Frederick Matthias Alexander, and he came up with what is called the Alexander technique. He was an Australian actor, and he was suffering from voice loss, and he went to the doctor and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with his voice, why he was losing his voice. They sent him home, and he went and set up a few mirrors and sat in front of them and started acting as he would normally act in the theater, and realized that he was distorting his windpipe and contracting the front of his body. So he was going into what we will talk about a little later, the startle reflex, which was causing him to lose his breath. So he started to break down the movement into its component parts and sense and feel and analyze each movement. Instead of moving with force to change his posture, he actually relaxed those areas. So this is what the basis of what somatics is about. So how do we let go of these habitual tense reflexive patterns that are happening in the body? So his work, the Alexander technique, focuses on dynamic posture. And then Moshe Feldenkrais was next. He was a Ukrainian-Israeli physicist and electrical engineer, and he had a very keen interest in human movement. He had a black belt in judo, so he learned from Alexander and then took the movement or the methodology a little further into the clinical realm by working with people with neurological dysfunctions. So, and also using hands-on, and he came up with the term functional integration, which was assisting the person with the movements, noticing and sensing and doing them over and over again. And he also came up with kinetic mirroring, which is a term that he got from the education that he had in judo. Was instead of going against someone's resistance, we go with someone's resistance. So it's taking the muscle at the origin and insertion and doing the work for the muscle, relaxes the muscle. So it basically turns off the activation and the muscle lets go. So when you do the work for the muscle, it'll relax. And Thomas Hanna was a student of Moshe Feldenkrais. So you can see how the education is building on itself with each person who is learning about somatics. And Thomas Hanna was a Feldenkrais practitioner, a student of Moshe, and he integrated what he learned from Moshe and with Hans Selye's work, which he's a stress pioneer, and he studied the effects of stressors on an organism, positive and negative. And he took both of those, both of that knowledge and also the knowledge of neurophysiology, and he came up with clinical Hanna somatics. And that is what I teach. So what is somatic education? Thomas Hanna simply defined as using the sensory motor learning or feedback loop of the somatic nervous system to gain that voluntary control over one's physiological processes. And it's somatic in a sense that it's first person. It's from the viewpoint that you only have. The first person perspective, you're the only one who can sense and feel what is happening inside your own body. And the learning is self-initiated and self-controlled. So if we look at the brain and we see where the sensory cortex is, so this is the primary sensory cortex, this is the somatic sensory cortex, all this blue over here. And then we have the primary motor cortex and then the somatic motor cortex. So they're right next to each other. So if you think of this loop as information, sensory information going up to the brain, to the sensory cortex, and then it's very fast how it communicates with the motor cortex and then directs the muscles in the body what to do and how to move. So we use the somatic nervous system to gain conscious control of habitually tight muscles in the body to release, lengthen, and completely relax. The somatic nervous system is what we use to learn anything. So just think of it as like, this is an education, exactly what the title says. Somatic education or restorative education is just you're learning, because a lot of these habitual patterns that cause us to be tight or cause tension in the body and muscles to be tight is learned. So we have the power to self-learn, self-teach, self-organize, self-regulate, and self-correct. And that is essentially self-heal. The body knows how to heal. As long as we're giving it the right things and teaching it the right things, it will restore itself. So Hanna somatics is just very gentle movement sequences, bringing a sensory awareness, so bringing about that somatic awareness, training your brain how to gain conscious control over those tight muscles and allowing them to relax. So you're restoring efficient, effective, intelligent, fluid, pain-free movement. And this is not just for people who have an injury or who are in pain. This is for everyone. It's for athletes. It's for teaching children movement. It would be great to be a part of physical education in schools, teaching children how to be aware of their body and how their body is moving and how they can move it more intelligently will improve the way they move into adulthood. So this is really important and effective practice. Soma just means living body. It's a Greek word for living body, and that's your first person viewpoint. So you're experiencing yourself from the inside out. The body is the third person perspective, which is what we see. So you see your friends, your family, they look the same on the outside, but on the inside, their soma is changing every day. So as a somatic movement teacher, when I teach a class, I see everyone in the third person perspective, but I'm aware and I'm conscious of their somas, and that each time I teach them, their somas are different every time, depending on what they have responded to in their life leading up to the class. So the myth of aging, this is what Thomas Hanna talks about in his book. And because he was a philosopher, his biggest question was, why are people not free? And he looked at babies. We see in this picture down below, we see, as babies, they're learning how to, first is we learn how to lift our head, and then how to roll over, and then how to crawl, and then how to walk, and then how to run. So they've learned all these, we've learned these functional movements. And if you also look at toddlers, they know how to hinge at the hip perfectly. They know how to squat perfectly. And it's basically, as we age, due to the responding to life's events and things, cause our bodies or our minds to forget how to control our body well and move it well. So as a baby, we have learning functional and fundamental movement. And then as adults, we learn how to walk upright, face forward, and carry out our lives and walk towards our goals in life. And then this one here is the idea that aging is degenerative. Oh, we're going to end up with a hunchback and maybe walking with a cane, or in a lot of pain, stiff, senile, and slow. So this is the myth of aging, that when we age, we are just going to be in pain and there's degeneration. But that's not true. The truth is, our bodies, our minds follow the use it or lose it principle. And that's the same with movement. If you're not moving the way you used to move as a child or as an adult, young adult, when you get into your later years, your brain just forgets how to move. You will be restricted, you will be slower, you will be stiffer. So as long as we keep moving, we will maintain function. So that idea that when we age, oh, we need to slow down, I'm too old, I can't do that. And maybe someone asks you to go play a sport or something. Oh no, I did that when I was young, I can't do that now. I'll probably pull something or break a bone. Or so we limit ourselves as we age. We're thinking, we need to slow down and stop doing those activities in order not to get hurt. But the truth is, if we continue doing those activities into our old age, we will not get hurt. We will maintain what we had. We won't lose it, and we will maintain function. So the 3 reflexive patterns that Thomas Hanna found that our bodies go into in response to stress are the green light reflex, which is also called the Landau reflex. And this happens around or between 4 to 6 months of age, when as a child or as a baby, we're on tummy time or we're on our tummies and we hear our mother's voice. And the first thing we do is lift our head to look and see where she is. That lifting of the head is that Landau reflex going on in the back of your body. All the muscles in the back of your body contract to lift the head. And that's what happens. And it's in our body, and we have it all throughout life. This reflex also happens in response to responsibilities that we have. So it's also called get up and go reflex. When your alarm clock goes off, or you have an appointment to run to, or you're running somewhere, this is what activates. So your back contracts and you're upright and you're ready to go. So you could think of this also as the soldier or stand at attention reflex. So everything in the back is tight and contracted. And then the next one is the red light reflex. This is our protective reflex, which is in response to a threat. So if there's a loud noise or if there's any kind of danger that's around, first thing we do is contract in the front. the startle reflex. We're startled. We may curl up in a ball, like in the fetal position, and all the muscles in the front of our body contract and tighten in response to those things. These can also be learned. So the red light reflex can be learned if you're in a habitual posture over time. So if you're sitting at a computer or you're driving, maybe you're a truck driver or you're a taxi driver, you drive and you're sitting for long periods, this becomes habituated in your brain and your posture starts to change and start looking like the red light reflex. So if we look at these wooden figures over here, this is Martha, my instructor and CEO owner of Essential Somatics. Over here, this is green light in the first one. So in green light here, this is her standing up, showing the green light reflex. And then red light is the contraction in the front of the body. So in the case of this wooden characters would be this one on the right. And then trauma reflex, this can happen anywhere in the body, but visually it shows up on one side or the other. So trauma reflex, like I said, can happen anywhere. Sometimes when I'm working with a client, they may get twitching in their cheek or twitching in their facial muscles, like other parts of the body might be releasing and letting go where there was trauma. So this one is visually on one side or the other, so it looks like this. So for example, maybe you rolled an ankle or you broke a leg, or if you had any type of surgery on one side of the body, you will have this, it'll start to contract from the center, and then you get this side bend look for the trauma reflex. And then you can kind of tell, okay, someone has had some sort of trauma on that side. Sensory motor amnesia. This is defined by Thomas Hanna, and it refers to part of your mind forgetting how to gain that conscious control and how to move those muscles and have control over those muscles in an intelligent way. So they've lost some portion of that ability to control them. And it usually shows up in the body as jumpy, jerky, shaky, or a jolt. So when we're doing the movements and you're experiencing, if you come to experience one of the classes, when you're releasing, you may notice some jumpy, jerky, shaky, or you may notice that there's a jolt, and that's your brain will contract the muscles. And then when it's trying to consciously release, it lets go. So it doesn't have full conscious control over those muscles. This whole thing is about training the brain. If you have sensory motor amnesia, it means that your brain needs more repetition. You just have to practice it again and again. And then the smoother you can make the movement, the more control your brain has over your muscles. Sensory motor amnesia is a pathology requiring not treatment, but education. Typical and mental physical diseases of our society are learned. So if they're learned, we can unlearn them, or we can learn to make new motor pathways in the brain, so that instead of it going into and habituating into those reflexive patterns, we can recognize when it's going on and then help ourselves get out of those tight muscle patterns to relieve and bring those muscles back to zero length so they can contract freely and move freely. This picture here, you can't feel it, you can't move it. If you can't sense it, you can't move it. But the more you move it, the more you can sense it. So that's essentially the sensory motor feedback loop. How does sensory motor amnesia show up in the body? So now we're going to get into, okay, how do we recognize if we have these reflexive patterns going on in our body? The green light reflex, you will have neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, lordosis, which just is an overarching of the lordotic curve in the back. So here, this picture at the lower left-hand corner, you can see the lower back is overly arched. and that's called lordosis. Degenerative disc disease, SI, joint pain or dysfunction, that's sacroiliac joint. That's where your spine meets your pelvis. And in those joints, you may have pain or dysfunction because if you think of the back, it's being constantly contracted and it takes the spine out of its neutral spine or natural curvature of the back, which is actually the strongest position of the back. And this can also cause piriformis syndrome, which is when the piriformis muscle becomes tight and then it puts pressure on the sciatic nerve, and you get symptoms of sciatica because of the piriformis muscle. And that usually happens if you're, again, in a posture for long periods of time. So you're sitting for long periods of time, the piriformis could get short and gets tight, and then again can put pressure on the sciatic nerve. Or where plantar fasciitis comes in is there's usually some tightness in the back, in the waist and hips. So, and that transfers all the way down because it's going to affect how your hips move, how your knees move, and how your ankles and feet move. And usually if you can release the lower back, you can relieve plantar fasciitis if it's a functional problem coming from the center of the body. The red light reflex or the startle reflex. One of the things that could happen is, and one of the very first things actually, is the shallow breathing. So breathing is the first thing to change in response to stress. When we are stressed out, the breathing, either our breathing goes shallow, goes lower, or if we're in a fight or flight, it's going higher. So depending on what type of stress our body is in, it'll affect our breathing. In this case, red light reflex, it's shallow breathing because the abdominal muscles contract, the rib cage downward depresses, and then we get our diaphragm gets stuck. And our diaphragm, even though it's an involuntary muscle, it is also a voluntary muscle. We have control over that muscle because for people that use that muscle, like singers or swimmers, people that have to control their breath and breathing, they have that conscious control over that muscle. So it also can get sensory motor amnesia. So when we're stuck in the red light reflex, the diaphragm gets stuck and then we are not breathing fully because the diaphragm is not contracting fully and the lungs are not able to fill. You could get neck pain because, of course, you're getting your forward head carriage. When you start to contract in the front, the muscles in the front contract, your head starts to go forward. Especially if you're on the computer, you can imagine the neck getting strained because the head is peering forward to look at the screen. The dowager's hump is that bump that some people get on the seventh cervical vertebrae on the neck, the last vertebrae of the neck. And what happens is with that forward head carriage, the muscles thicken because they need to be stronger to carry your head in that position. And then a little fat tissue forms over top, and that's how you get a dowager's hump. The kyphosis is the rounded upper back or the hunchback posture, which is this, you can see here on the bottom screen, the bottom lower left-hand corner of the screen, a kyphotic spine. So that's where the upper back is overly contracted or overly curved. And then TMJ is temporomandibular joint pain or dysfunction, and that's this picture here. That can be due to, again, the forward head carriage. Also, TMJ pain comes from dental work, especially if they have to work on those like back teeth and the mandible gets overstretched, then TMJ pain results. And you can relieve that pain with somatic movement education. It could take some time, but it is something that you can do because I've done it myself and it is worth it. Rather than getting a mouth guard or a mouth orthotic, it is better to learn this education and help yourself to relax those jaw muscles. The next one is tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on how you want to pronounce it, but that's the ringing in the ears, and that's also due to the misalignment of the head, the forward head posture, and your vestibular system gets off-centered as well, and you start getting ringing in your ears. Shoulder pain can result, and digestion and elimination problems. Why? Because your abdominals are contracted, you're shallow breathing, and they are not getting the blood flow, and they're not getting what I call the massage of the diaphragm. So when you're breathing, you're inhaling, your diaphragm contracts, it pushes your stomach contents down and out. If your abdominals are really tight, then there's nowhere for your bowels to go when you inhale. So what you want is to relax the abdominals, and so that the diaphragm can contract and relax. And what happens is your organs get a massage, and you have more blood flow to those organs. Nutrients are going into the cells, toxins are getting out of the cells, and you're able to detox and take in the nutrients and rebuild what you need to rebuild and get rid of what you need to get rid of. So relieving these muscles in the front of the body is really important. The trauma reflex, here are some of the things that show up with the trauma reflex: neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, scoliosis. Yes, scoliosis. And I understand some people are born with it, but what happens with scoliosis is with age, it gets worse. And the reason why it gets worse is because of the reflexive responses, these reflexive patterns, and our responses to stressors in life, which cause our body to get tighter and tighter, or cause our muscles to get tighter and tighter. So if you have scoliosis and as you age, it starts to get worse, this is because the muscles are getting tighter and tighter. But if you have this education, you can manage your scoliosis really, really well. Another thing that comes up with trauma reflex is hip pain. Because if you think of where the contraction is at the center, the hip is getting hiked up, the shoulder is coming down, and now could get knee pain, uneven leg length, and uneven gait. Gait just means the way you walk. It's just your walking pattern. And the movement technique that we use in somatic movement education or restorative movement education is pendiculation. And this is a 3-step process, or 3 phases, I like to call it. We take the muscle into a contraction a little more than it already is. And that's the reawakening portion of this technique. So it reawakens the mind to those tight muscles. So if you contract your back, tighten your back, your brain goes, oh, I feel those muscles. I feel that back tightening. And then once you have that conscious, so it takes those muscles from subconscious to conscious awareness or conscious control. Once you have that voluntary control, you can slowly and mindfully release and lengthen back to resting length. And then that's the second phase. And then the third phase is a complete relaxation, letting go of the tension in that muscle and completely relaxing those muscles. Step 3, some people are really stressed, really tense, or they're really high energy, on the go, 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 go. Somatics can feel like, oh, this is boring, this is too slow. And then this third phase of teaching the brain how to let go and completely relax the muscles is a challenge, because their brain has forgotten. They're just constantly in the go, 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 constantly in that high tension, high energy, that the brain has forgotten how to relax. And I've had students say to me when I'm teaching, oh, I love it when you tell us at the end to just let go of the work and let everything relax, but I can't do it. So, and I say, that's a great awareness, but you're still learning. So you're learning that your brain has forgotten how to relax, but with practice, you will learn how to let go of those muscles. You will learn how to relax those muscles. So all that is the education is bringing an awareness to the fact that your mind has lost control or lost the ability to completely relax your muscles. So that just tells you, oh, I need more practice in this area. And eventually you will learn how to relax. And now I'm going to compare passive stretching and pendiculation. So what's the difference between passive stretching and pendiculation? Passive stretching activates the stretch reflex, which is a protective reflex, and it is again a reflex. So what happens is when we're lengthening a muscle, so in this case the muscle's being pulled, so if I took my arm and I pulled it across my body like this, I'm stretching the muscle, lengthening it out. But if I lengthen it too far, it will activate the stretch reflex, which only goes through a reflex loop in the spine, and it will cause the muscle to contract again. So the stretch reflex is a protective reflex so that you don't stretch the muscles beyond their limit and you don't injure your muscles or the connective tissue. You don't pull a tendon or injure the soft tissue. So that's what's happening with the passive stretching. So if you just passive stretched over and over and over again, you're essentially building more tension in the body rather than relaxing it. So in the moment, it may feel good, but you're actually building more tension in the body. And this is I'm just talking about passive stretching. I'm not talking about PNF stretching or active isolated stretch or the fascial stretch therapy. Like I know there's other ways of stretching that are effective, but in this case, I'm talking about passive stretching, where you're holding a stretch. Versus pendiculation. With pendiculation, you have learning involved. So when the muscle is contracted, there is a message sent to your sensory cortex, which is this red line here, talks to the motor cortex, and then the motor cortex sends the signals down your efferent neurons to your muscles and tells the muscle to move, how to move. So this is the difference between pendiculation and stretching. So when we're doing restorative movement, we are teaching the brain how to gain conscious control of the muscles through the technique of pendiculation so that we can teach the muscle how to let go, lengthen, and completely relax. Okay, what are some of the benefits of restorative movement education? This is what we're going to talk about next. It's great for relieving muscle tension. It's great for improving posture and movement, for reducing stress, improving sleep, improving your breathing, enhancing athletic performance. Like I had mentioned before, this is not just for people who are in pain. This is for even elite athletes can benefit from this practice, or amateur athlete, any athlete. Someone who wants to improve that in their sport, or even if you're a weightlifter or you go to the gym, you want to increase your ability to lift weights and you want to lift more efficiently and effectively, this is a great way to practice and to learn how to gain more control over your muscles and muscle patterns. It's great for prevention and recovery from injuries. So if you're more aware of your body, you're more aware of where you are in space and how to control your members, there's less likely you will get injured. And if you've had an injury or you've had a surgery like a knee surgery or a hip surgery, and you can learn this practice, this is a great way of recovery to teach the brain how to gain conscious control of those muscles that have been injured so that you can restore functional movement back to those areas. It's effective for warming up and cooling down when you're working out. So I also teach exercise therapy and exercise rehab, and I always include somatics as a warm-up and as a cool down, because in the warm-up, when you do even just one somatic movement, you're bringing your mind into full control, conscious control of your muscles, so that when you're activating during the training and the strengthening portion of your workout, you are in more control, and it's more intelligent and it's more effective when you're more aware of what you're doing in the gym. And then as a cool down is a way of relaxing, letting go of the tension that you built up during the workout to completely lengthen and relax those muscles. And it is also very effective for DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. If you do this as a cool down, it can decrease the amount of soreness you have after a workout. It's great at increasing flexibility and range of motion. So of course, if you're tight, you're stiff, and the muscles are shorter, and you have a decreased flexibility and range of motion. So with this practice, you'll be able to lengthen and let go of those muscles, and you will get increased flexibility and more movement, more mobility. And the last one is improved balance and coordination. So this is really huge as well, because you have that conscious control. And one of the principles of somatics is that we move center to periphery. So once you have control of the muscles at the center of your body, your periphery go along with it, and you move much more effectively, and you're much better balanced and coordinated in your movement. Why is restorative movement education so important? Number one, no one can quote unquote fix you. So this is a practice that requires you to become responsible for your own wellness and your own health care. And I'm talking about the preventative and also for chronic illness, because this is not, I'm not talking about trauma care. For example, if you are in a car accident or you break a leg or you dislocate a shoulder, something that needs immediate medical attention, obviously go to the doctor. You need someone to help you. This is more for what can we do to keep ourselves functioning, keep ourselves well and healthy, so that we don't get into chronic diseases that cause us to have illness into our older age. There's no one more concerned about your health and well-being than yourself, so who better to empower? This is what this practice teaches, is it gives you tools in your toolbox. Whenever pain arises or whenever there's a time you're not moving as well as you'd like to move, you can use the tools that you learn in restorative movement education to get that somatic awareness, to get yourself out of pain or moving more freely and more intelligently. And again, I had mentioned this in an earlier slide, we have this capacity for intellectual freedom. We are self-learning, self-teaching, self-organizing, self-regulating, and self-correcting, which is self-healing human beings. So we can educate ourselves and how to move more intelligently and more freely. We can live in a stressful world, but not have the stress reside in us. This is an active process. It's happening from the inside out so that it is more powerful and it's longer lasting. Anything that you do that requires you to take action is more powerful. We all know this. So same thing with your diet, like eating healthy, exercising, getting enough sleep, managing your time well, your relationships. All this stuff is intentional and it's active. In order to have the life we want, we have to be actively involved and we need to take action. That's what this movement education is an active process. It's not something that someone does to your body. It's something you do from the inside out. So for example, when you go for a massage, it feels great. If you're relaxed, you feel so light, and it's such a wonderful experience to get massage therapy. But the drawback is it's short-lived. Whatever tension that relieved, maybe 2 or 3 days, maybe a week later, you're back to the pain, the same pain that you went into the massage session for. So what this education will do is put tools in your toolbox. So like, it's okay to go to massage, but if you had this education, you would be able to spread your appointments out a little further apart. So something you can do on your own to keep your body out of pain. And it's done from the inside out. It addresses you as a whole. We can't separate spirit, mind, and body. We are one. So we need to address the human being as one. And this is where our healthcare system failed us, is that they're only looking at the signs and symptoms. They're not asking us about our lifestyle, about what we're eating, about our stress levels, about our relationships, and things like that that could be affecting our health. This education will cultivate your self-awareness, and you'll be able to address all these parts of you, whether it's something to do with your spiritual health or your mental health or your physical health or your social health or your financial health, whatever health spectrum it is. You will have a greater awareness, and you will be able to take action and improve in those areas. This practice is exciting, empowering, and it provides hope. It's exciting. Why? Because it's fun, because you're constantly learning. If you're a curious person and you love to move your body, this is a lot of fun. It's exciting and it piques the curiosities. Like, wow, I didn't know this about myself. When you take time, you quiet yourself and you turn your attention inward, you get to learn some exciting things about yourself. And it's also exciting because you're making change, and it's positive change. It's empowering because now you have tools in your toolbox to get yourself out of pain or to move more intelligently and move more effectively at whatever activity you want to do in your life. And it provides hope for aging, because let's get rid of that myth of aging. And this is hope that as we age, we're actually getting better and better and more intelligent. And we're learning more. So we're getting wiser and wiser, but we're also getting more functional and better in our physiology as well as the psychology. So while we're increasing in education and in our intellectually, we're also want to increase our movement intelligence. So how well we can connect with our own body and how well we function. And that's what this gives us. And the more we can do that, the more functional we will be as we age. So for more information and to register for a somatic movement education class or workshop, you can call or text me. And there's also Thomas Hanna's book, and Martha's book. Thomas Hanna's book is great if you want to get into the science of somatics. So learning about the sensory motor feedback loop, learning about the reflexive patterns, learning about how this gets stuck in the physiology. And he also has some anecdotal stories about people that he has helped in his own clinic. Then that's the book for you. And there is some movements at the back with some of those wooden figures that you saw in one of the slides that I had. So Martha's book is great if you want to get into the movements and you want to be able to have a look at the step-by-steps and how to do the movements. If you want to experience this for yourself, you can sign up for a workshop or a private session with me, or a class. I'm teaching in Langley here in British Columbia. I also teach online, so you can get in a class from anywhere in the world. That is all for now. And I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful for those who are curious about what I do and what I teach at Home Fitness Plus, and one of the services that I offer, restorative movement based on my somatic movement education. I hope to see you or hear from you soon, and take care and be well.